Hey, welcome back to Pete's Behavioural Insights and Theories, aka Pete's Bits. Some of you have been leaving some very kind comments in the comment section of my videos, and I really do appreciate it, because every time I read those comments, it's so motivating for me to make more content, so thank you. In today's video, we're talking about messenger effects, so let's just jump right into it. So I've made quite a few videos on this channel before, but I've never really told you about myself and my own credentials. So let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Peter Judo Di Harjo, and I am a trained psychologist. I recently graduated from the University of Warwick with a joint honours degree in psychology and global sustainable development. Warwick is a very good university generally, but it's particularly good for the field of behavioural science. During my undergraduate studies, I took modules such as psychology and the law. That's how I found out about Dr. Loftus's work, neurobiology, and of course, behaviour change. In my spare time as an undergraduate, I was the head of engagement at the Warwick Behavioural Insights team, where I gave multiple talks on behavioural science to undergraduates through to PhD and even professors. I've conducted nudge-a-thons, which are behavioural science brainstorming sessions. And at the end of my undergraduate study, I received an unconditional offer to study behavioural and economic science at the University of Warwick Business School, which is one of the best postgraduate behavioural science courses in the UK. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next year. While I might only be 21 years old, for the last 6 years of my life, I've been quite literally obsessed with this field of behavioural science. I read loads of books, loads of articles, listen to hours and hours and hours of podcasts, and of course watch lots of videos, and of course I do lots of research for these videos every single week. So what's the point in me telling you about myself and all of my credentials? Well, hopefully by telling you my qualifications, I'm raising my authority as a messenger of behavioural science. If you tell people your expertise in a field, then you raise your authority as a messenger in that field, and therefore people are far more likely to listen to you. And authority is just one of the 3 ways in which you can increase your effectiveness as a messenger that we're going to talk about in today's video. But first, why are messenger effects important? Well, as per usual in behavioural science, it comes back down to choice overload. We have too much information and too little time to process it. Therefore, our most precious resource is our attention. So how do we quickly and fairly reliably decide which information we should pay our attention to? Well, research in social psychology shows that who delivers that message is incredibly important. Often the who says what is more important than the what is said when it comes to getting people to listen to your message. Multiple studies and intervention attempts have revealed that getting the messenger wrong can be the make or break difference for your intervention being a complete success or a complete failure. Now, the 3 ways in which you can increase your effectiveness as a messenger that I will talk about in this video are authority, liking, and unity. Let's start with authority. One of the most famous psychological experiments is the Milgram study. Now, I'm sure most of you know what the Milgram study is, but for those of you who don't, it was an experiment designed to try and find out how seemingly ordinary German people could become so twisted by the Nazi Party to commit such atrocities against Jewish people. The study was trying to investigate obedience to authority, and it had participants administer electric shocks in gradual increments as a kind of teaching protocol. When the other participant in the study, who was actually just an actor, got a question wrong, the participant had to administer an electric shock as a punishment for getting the question wrong. These electric shocks got progressively larger and potentially more lethal. Things got extra dicey in the experiment when the participant was told that the person they were shocking actually suffered from a heart condition and could die from the electric shocks. Yet, what Milgram found was that when there was an authoritative researcher in the room, participants would continue to administer electric shocks of increasing lethality when they were egged on by the voice of an authoritative figure in the form of a researcher. Now, admittedly, the paradigm of the Milgram experiment is a little contentious, but what it seemed to demonstrate was that our capacity to be obedient to authoritative figures is far greater than we could ever imagine. So how do we increase our authority as messengers? Well, I showed you one method at the start of this video. I told you my credentials. Explaining your credentials and your level of expertise is one of the best ways of increasing your authority as a messenger. One example could come from Cialdini's influence. In the book, he talks about a group of real estate agents who were able to increase the number of appointments that they made by 20% and the number of signed contracts by 15% with an intervention that cost them absolutely nothing. What did they do? They simply arranged for reception staff to explain the credentials of their colleagues before they transferred them to the call. So if you were a customer interested in lettings, you would be told, "Lettings? Oh, let me refer you to Sandra. Sandra has over 15 years experience of letting properties in this area." Or if you wanted information about selling properties, you would get this message. "Selling? Let me refer you to our head of sales, John. John has over 20 years of experience selling properties. I'll refer you to him now." This one line of information explaining the expertise to the customers then raised the authority of the messengers and therefore made them far more persuasive and effective. I'll give you another example. In a study on health interventions, it was found that interventions that were delivered by research assistants or health educators were far more effective than if they were merely delivered by a trained facilitator or a teacher, which again shows that information delivered by an expert is far more persuasive even if the information being given is exactly the same. So should you just increase the authority of your messaging every single time you need to deliver a message? Well, unfortunately, it's not so simple. For certain populations, they can grow to dislike authority. For example, if you distrust the government, then when the government tries to deliver a message to you, you may reject it based on the principle that you distrust the government, even if the quality of the message is actually very good. So that's where our second type of messenger comes in, which is the liking messenger. Now, the principle of liking is very simple. It basically posits that we're far more likely to say yes to people who we like. And one of the greatest determinants for deciding who we like is that we like people who are similar to us. So choosing a messenger who is similar to our target demographic is going to be particularly effective for those demographics who are resistant to the voice of authority. Let me give you an example. Teenagers are notoriously resistant to the will of authority. Teenagers don't like to follow the will of their parents or of any kind of adult authority over their lives. So one study on smoking found that teenagers were 1000% more likely to smoke if two of their peers smoked, versus only 26% more likely to smoke if one of their parents did, showing that their actions were far more influenced by the behavior of their peers than of their parents. On another study looking at HIV education on ethnic minorities, the authors found that homogeneous ethnicity of staff decreased participation, while a mix of races and ethnicities increased the odds of participation, showing that if your target demographic consists of minority individuals, then you should definitely have minority messengers, as they're far more likely to come across as trustworthy. But perhaps the most persuasive messenger of all is my final one, which is unity. Now, before I tell you about unity, please can I remind you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Okay, so what is the unity principle? Many of you are familiar with Cialdini's 6 principles of influence outlined in his book, Influence. But what you may not know is that Cialdini actually introduced a 7th principle in his more recent book, Pre-Suasion. I just finished Pre-Suasion last week, and this is basically what the unity principle is. The unity principle means that the messenger is not just like us, but he is of us. Now, to explain the distinction, consider this. I may have far more in common in terms of my interest, hobbies, and social status with a fellow student at Warwick than my own brother. But when the question is who is of us and who is just like us, there is no question. Of course, my brother is one of us. He is my own family. It is this idea that we are an in-group versus an out-group, and that we trust those people who are in our group. Dr. Robert Cialdini explained it this way. It's about the categories that individuals use to define themselves, and their groups such as race, ethnicity, nationality, and family, as well as political and religious affiliations. A key characteristic of these categories is that their members tend to feel at one with, merged with, the others. They are the categories in which the conduct of one member influences the self-esteem of other members. Simply put, we is the shared me. But if you're not in a unified in-group with your target population, how do you invoke this power of unity? Well, there's a few things that you can do. One is to use specific and unique jargon in order to convey an in-group. Take CrossFit, for example. CrossFitters seem to be a very tight community, and you could consider them as a kind of in-group. There's lots of CrossFit jargon such as WOD, workout of the day, AMRAP, as many reps as possible, and T to B, or toes to bar. This kind of unique vocabulary helps create group cohesion and translates to the rest of the group that you have shared values and goals. Another example might be the US Marines. Consider their tagline, the few, the proud. It conveys a level of exclusivity and that this is a very small, tight-knit group, and hence creates unity. Another way to create unity is to define your outgroup. Consider Marmite's tagline: you either love it or you hate it. Although in truth, I myself am pretty indifferent about Marmite. By Marmite creating this false dichotomy of people who either love Marmite or hate it, they are creating a false in-group versus out-group. And when people feel like they belong to an in-group, they're far more likely to listen to the messages of those fellow people in the in-group. But in my opinion, I think the most effective way to invoke the feelings of unity is to lean on the idea of family ties. Here's an example that Cialdini gave in his book Pre-Suasion. In one of his college classes, Cialdini wanted to compare attitudes of students and their parents by having both fill out questionnaires. Cialdini never had an issue with student compliance with this request, but getting the students' parents to comply was always far more difficult. Often the response rate from students' parents was below 20%. But with one small tweak to the assignment, he was able to increase the response rate from 20% to 97%. So what tweak did he make? Cialdini said he would give the students 1 extra point on 1 test if their parents completed the survey. 1 point on 1 test on a semester-long course was a very inconsequential result. That 1 point on 1 test was very unlikely to have any impact on the student's final grade. But because we care about our family and our children, and we want them to have every small little advantage that we can give them, by incentivizing the parents with the promise of helping their children do better, Cialdini's response rate went from poor to almost perfect. In fact, the idea of family is perhaps the most powerful idea in the principle of unity. In Pre-Suasion, Cialdini talked about how Warren Buffett used the principle of unity too. Warren Buffett is in charge of the famous firm Berkshire Hathaway, and a big concern for the investors of Berkshire Hathaway is what would happen when Warren Buffett was no longer in charge, since he's very old. So, in a particularly important letter to shareholders regarding succession plans, Buffett wrote this: "I would tell you what I would say to my family today if they asked me about Berkshire's future." By telling his investors that this is exactly what he would tell his family, Cialdini says that Buffett becomes extremely convincing. So, what are the takeaways from today's video? Firstly, always think about who is delivering the information in your intervention. The messenger can be the make or break factor for your intervention being a success or a complete failure. Now, there are 3 main types of powerful messenger: the authoritative messenger, bolstered by expertise and experience; the liking messenger, who's best bolstered by similarity; and finally, the unity messenger, who we think of as one of our own. And so my final piece of advice would be that thorough research into your target population is required to determine the appropriate messenger. The same intervention across 2 different populations might not work because the 2 populations might respond differently to different types of messenger. So make sure you do your research, make sure you know what types of messengers your population respond well to, and then pick the right one. Hey, congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Next week we're going to talk about cognitive fluency. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss out on that next upload. Is there a type of messenger that I didn't think about? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.